Welcome back to another episode of the Filmaholic here. This is my One Tree Hill rewatch that I've been doing. Taking episodes, discussing them, kind of giving my opinion on each one. And so if you haven't checked out the past videos, go check it out. I got rankings of episodes as too for the high school years. Check all that out. And we are moving through season 6 right now. We're on 610, which is Even Fairy Tales. Even fairy tale characters would be jealous. And this episode aired November 10th, 2008, around Veterans Day. It was directed by Janice Cook and written by Nikki Schiffelbein. Sorry if I butchered her last name. I'm not great at pronouncing names, but it made sense for this to air around Veterans Day because it was the main thing about this episode is the USO show that Peyton's throwing on for the troops, but also her brother, who is came back a couple episodes ago, and they had like a little scene together. But he's also in this episode, and he's talking to Peyton and stuff because she recently met they're both their father, which he had more of a relationship with than she did because he was actually around when he was a kid and then left, which is interesting because you don't really get that in this season when she meets Mick. And I think they should have actually put that in that conversation between her and Mick, Derek, because I don't think that they even mention him in those episodes, which is odd. I think they should have done that. But he's still struggling with that and letting go, and this is also his last episode, which is weird because I don't feel like they have a good final moment. And maybe they would have brought him back more. I don't know. I honestly think they should have brought him back for a longer arc. But I mean, he is in the Marines, so maybe he wasn't going to be around that long enough to have an arc like his character. I don't know. I think you should have brought him back more, and maybe they were going to bring him back more in a season 7 if things had worked out differently. But who knows? That's the main thing about this episode. Haley's performing for the first time as well in front of a crowd. Mia's back. Sam's has the opportunity to be helping out at this concert. And she's also worried because Brooke gets a phone call that she's offered a baby, which at the end of the episode you find out she's not going to be able to get that baby because she is fostering Sam. And really just like I think it strengthens the relationship between Brooke and Sam too, that she ends up turning down this baby, this opportunity, so that she can still have Sam. And it's really sweet. And I like their relationship. Another big thing about this episode is Julian, his past with Peyton and Lucas responding to that. And Peyton is confused at first because how Lucas is responding, and he actually ends up punching Julian, and Julian lets it happen. He takes the punch, and he's not really mad about it. What he is upset about is now that this has happened and came out, Lucas has decided he's not going to make the movie, which Julian, is blunt with him. He's like, in the risk of being hit again, I want you on this property. I want you to be the screenwriter. I want you to be your involvement. But the movie's happening regardless. Like, you've already signed the contract. It's happening. I've already invested this money, got backers, everything is happening. And so ultimately he talks to Peyton and tries to make Peyton believe that he's not there for her and that he actually wants to make this film. And then she goes and talks to Lucas to finally get him to agree to make the film. And everything's worked out by the end of it, that it's happening and they're going to make the movie despite these past issues and whatnot. Nathan's also, he doesn't go to the concert, which I think is kind of silly. He needs to take it easy, which yes he does, but he could have went to a concert. Ultimately they don't have his character go to the concert because they want him to stay home and watch the Slam Ball Championship, so that he can be visited by Q's ghost, I guess. Okay, two things. One, it does work because it is emotional, and I like the scenes that he has with Quentin in this episode, especially with Quentin almost tears up towards the end of him quitting and all this and whatnot. It's really good. I really like it, but ultimately it also doesn't make sense. Why is Nathan seeing Q? In the past, when we've seen ghosts and stuff in the show, I've been for it. I really liked it. Well, the first thing I want to mention is season 3, when Peyton sees the Dark Angel version of her. She was actually asleep. That was a dream, right? Because we see her talking to the Dark Ghost and all this, and then she wakes up and sees the bracelet. So that's actually her subconscious in her dream. So that's explained. Fine with that. Season 4, Keith comes back. Lucas sees Keith, and Kieran sees Keith, both in dreams. and they're both in the hospital. Like something traumatic happened to them, and they saw Keith in that way. Even when Nathan heard Keith when he was underwater, that was a traumatic event that could have sparked something like this. And Dan seeing Keith, well, when he saw the kid, that wasn't actually a ghost. That was just his mind because he was under so much stress. When he sees Keith in jail, that's an instance where I just believe that the ghost was there and that he did see Keith. Also because of his mental state, and it's believable too. But I really think that ghost was there in the show, obviously. In this instance, I guess we're meant to believe that Q as a ghost is just there with Nathan. That didn't really work for me because he wasn't under any kind of traumatic thing where Q was there to save him or talk to him, or he wasn't in a coma or anything like that. Like, he was just there watching TV and Q showed up. It wasn't a dream. It was like actually happening in a ghost, which honestly, hold on. Which honestly, when I was watching the episode, I was like, does Nathan have like a brain tumor or something? Like, what's happening? Why is he seeing like random people, dead people? It didn't make sense to me, but it did work because of the emotion in it. But I wouldn't have written that personally. But what really bothers me about this episode is while Nathan's watching the slam ball thing on TV, because this is the actual game he's watching, the actual slam ball game, the championship. I know because I looked up on my IMDb the people that are responsible for the show's continuity and script supervisors and stuff like that. But I'll say it anyways. I don't understand what they're doing. Like, as a fan, and I'm not like, I could do so much better with this continuity of the show, and it bothers me. I love the show, but like, why would you're showing the slam ball championship and you don't cut it off before they say 2008? That really bothers me. It's not 2008. Is he watching an old game? It's not 2008. That's when they filmed it, but that's not when it's based. Just like they've literally made banners that say 2007 state championships when it would have been 2006. You got to fully understand that, because that just makes me so angry at the continuity thing. Because on it, like, you stick with what was on Keith's grave, which is January 23rd, 2006. That's when the school shooting was. That was the start of the second semester of their senior year of high school. They would have graduated in 2006. 2005 would have started, or season 5 would have started in 2010, and Jamie's birthday in 5/15 would have been June 2011. So right now in the show is 2011, not 2008. That was 3 years ago. So that really bothers me. And there's other continuity errors too involving, Jimmy's grave, the banners, just so much different stuff that is annoying. One thing, I don't know, like, I just wish that had been handled better. One thing I do like is that in season 9, I think there's a shot of Quinn's camera that says 2015, which is the year that season 9 is based, is 2015. So I like that someone finally understood and did the time right there. But that's just a rant about the timelines and continuity. That's really bothersome. But my favorite moment of this episode is Brooke and Julian's first scene. Brooke meets Julian in this episode, and they have a little back and forth about being the third wheel in Lucas and Peyton's love story, and just foreshadowing their future together. And I really, really like that scene, and it's the best scene of the episode. And the next episode I'm going to talk about here in this video is 611, which is We Three, My Echo, My Shadow, and Me. This is another dream episode, like the one in season 2, but instead of Nathan having it, it is Lucas having the dream, and he's not in any sort of coma. He just falls asleep and has this elaborate dream, which aired November 17th, 2008. And I'll go ahead and mention the director. It was directed by Joe Davola, who is a producer on the show as well, and has directed a few episodes so far. But he directed this one. But most importantly, it was written by Chad Michael Murray. This is the one and only episode that Chad writes in the series. But apparently he was really passionate about this episode and had been thinking about making it for a while and finally got them to let him do it. But they're in the 1940s. So the episode is based in the 1940s in Lucas's dream. And they're playing, all the characters they still have the same name. Lucas, Dan, Peyton, all that. They all have the same name, but they're not the same characters, just in the 1940s. They're how Luke imagines them being in the 1940s. Which I know I've talked to some people that don't like this episode because which I don't like the dream episode in season 2, because I think it's just, I don't agree with what happens in the episode, and I'm just not a fan of it. This one I am a fan of because the whole 1940s thing was cool and fun for me. I really liked that. And also Dan's heavily involved as the villain. It's just a fun episode to watch. And I know it had to be a lot of fun for the cast to be able to play these characters, but jump into something different, not play the same thing they've been playing, and in a different time period. So a couple things I want to mention about this episode. There's not too much to talk about, really, but it's interesting how Lucas sees people in his mind, because it is his dream of good and bad, because most of the characters are good, obviously. But you have Dan as the villain, because that's who Lucas sees as his villain. Obviously, they just mentioned that a couple episodes ago. You're the villain of his story. So Dan is the villain of this episode, but Julian is his main henchman. So that shows that Lucas, as of right now, sees Julian to be a bad guy. So he's working with Dan. Owen, who Lucas has met, but doesn't really know at all, has any scenes with, anything like that. He's in the dream too, but as a cop. That doesn't really, he's not bad, but he's not a friend of Lucas or anything in the episode. So I see that as more of somebody Lucas sees as neutral. And also, it's funny too with Mouth, who is obviously a reporter. He's a journalist in this dream. A little bit more, definitely different than Mouth is, because he's very drunk all the time and not as reserved, I guess, as Mouth would be. But it's funny because him seeing Mouth as a drunk in this dream, because of the times that Mouth has gotten drunk, are so standoutish in the show, right? Of him getting drunk and acting crazy and then passing out and then hearing people talk about stuff. Which all happens in this episode, which is interesting, that being in Lucas's mind. And just like other little bits of him telling Brooke, or mentioning that Brooke's going to change the world someday. That's what he wrote in the book about her. So that's why he would say that in his mind, in his dream. Love all that in the subconsciousness of what Lucas would imagine. Also, there are a couple things. One thing I want to point out is the club is called Karen's Cafe, which at first I was like, this is stupid. Why is it called Karen's Cafe? Why didn't you take the name Trick for the club, or call it Karen's Club or Karen's Cabaret or something else? But then I got to thinking that this is based in the 1940s. Karen, who owned Karen's Cafe first in this dream, even though she wasn't in the dream, it's mentioned that she owned it first, would have owned it for about 20 years, like she did in the show before getting rid of Karen's Cafe, which would have put us back into the 20s during Prohibition. So my assumption is that this, in his dream, and it's all a dream and a show, but in this dream, in this reality, Karen's Cafe was created during Prohibition and called Karen's Cafe as a cover when they actually had alcohol. And that's why it was still called Karen's Cafe. They just kept the name into this period. I like that backstory. It's really cool. And also, my biggest question is, obviously Dan killed Keith in this version as well. And they call him Keith Scott. I don't know if they ever mentioned Dan's last name to be Scott in the dream. They might. I'm assuming that it is, but I don't know if they do say his last name to be Scott, or if they just call him Dan in the episode. But he does. My question is him and Keith still brothers in this episode? And because I don't get from this dream that he's Lucas's biological father. Because that would be a little bit weird with the whole Peyton angle they take in this episode of essentially Dan being the stepfather of Peyton in this episode, because he was in love with Peyton's mother, who's dead, and he ended up taking care of Peyton after that. So I don't know. That's a couple questions, but ultimately it doesn't matter because it is a dream and doesn't tie into the rest of the series. But it's a fun episode, and I really like it. But that's all I have for 611. Also, the episode ends too with Lucas waking up and getting a call from Peyton and telling her never to leave him, and then she has a pain in her area, stomach, and falls down. And that's how the episode ends, leaving you on that cliffhanger of what's going to happen next, which takes us into the mid-season finale, which I'll talk about in the next video, because it's going to have a separate video just for the mid-season finale. Don't forget to like this video, though, guys, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.